So in this video, we take a deep dive into a viewer's endgame setup consisting of the Amex Trifecta with a focus on Delta and Hilton for airline and hotel benefits. This viewer loves to go to F1 races in Miami and Las Vegas and wanted to know how his credit card setup could be improved. I make several recommendations to his setup, including how to optimize his setup for air travel, hotel stays, as well as some options to consider when looking at his core credit card setup. This is a great in-depth analysis, and we cover a lot of intricate details when it comes to credit card issuers, benefits, and opportunities. So with all that being said, let's just jump right in. These are one of my favorite questions to answer because it goes over credit card strategies based off what you think is your credit card strategy. And there's not going to be a right or wrong answer to any of these questions, but because of, the questions you may ask or some of the things you may look for, what's really fun about doing these types of questions is that you get to kind of dig into what types of credit cards you may or may not want. And I think this is a really good one. So I'm going to read it to some degree, and then we'll kind of go into it. So, hi, Sen. I like your take on my endgame setup of these credit cards, which we'll go over in a moment. Every credit card can work for me except the rideshare credits, 1 clear credit, and 2 global entry credits. The airline credits will work for Delta E credits, which can be used along with the companion passes. He is looking for medallion silver status on Delta for Sky Priority Bag Drop at MCO, which is Orlando, since the normal lines are crazy long. The Euro points is for Hyatt, Emirates points is for transfer for domestic flights at 2 cents per point. He travels with his girlfriend at least twice a year. He tends to focus on F1 in Miami and Vegas. Those are very expensive times to go, but he says that resorts are plentiful in the areas. He thinks of maybe replacing Delta cards with the Ritz-Carlton and Brilliant cards. And should he add or cut a card or two or idea for a better setup? And he says that the CSR gives him Sapphire Lounge access at the Miami Grand Prix and has special tickets with Amex Platinum, doing the same for Vegas Grand Prix. And so definitely CSR and the Platinum are the 2 cards he wants to keep. So I kind of sped through that a little bit, so I'll leave it up here just a little while longer. But we are going to go into his credit card setup in more detail. And so he has about 12 cards listed here at the top. And so I'm going to show you this picture here, which basically shows all of his credit cards that he talked about in that particular setup. So I organized it in a way that would look like what I would imagine he would be using his cards for. So he basically is running the Amex Trifecta, so the Platinum, Gold, and the Blue Business Plus. He has 2 airline cards, which are the Delta Reserve, which I'll, just for funsies, I put that new 747 white model, as well as the Delta Platinum. He also has 2 Aspire cards, which are for Hilton. Then he has a bunch of Chase cards and City cards at the bottom. And so the top tier is kind of what I would think is kind of the primary setup, which is going to be your Amex Trifecta. You're using the middle tier for benefits, so your secondary kind of setup where you're not really spending on them per se, but you are using them for your benefits. And then on the bottom, you're having a lot of 5% cashback situations. You have the OG Freedom, the Freedom Flex, the Chase and Cash, and the City Custom Cash card. Of course, the Chase Sapphire Reserve to kind of tie it all together and give you access to those transfer partners. And so this is actually what the annual fees look like on those credit card setup. You have an annual fee of $3,600, which is a lot. I think we can certainly do better with that. And so kind of let's go over what I think is my first initial thoughts here. Well, before we do that, I do want to mention that with this, there's a lot of statement credits. And it's because of Amex. Because you're focusing on Amex credit cards, you have a ton of so many statement credits. And if it looks overwhelming to you, it's because it is. All the credits in orange are monthly credits. All the ones in red are going to be your quarterly or semi-annual credits. And so that's really a lot of credits to go with, not to mention that you have black credits on the bottom, which are just yearly credits. So that's a lot of credits. And not to mention, you have 2 Spires, so each credit on the second portion on the side is actually doubled. So you have 2 quarterly flight credits, 2 semi-annual Hilton Resort credits, and then 2 clear credits. And so, again, a lot of credits. And I think if you had this many credits for a year, it's maybe okay. But once you start to get to like 2 or 3 years, it's going to starting to get real taxing. And so I would just keep that in mind as we move forward. So my initial thoughts, you have a lot of annual fees, and 86% of that comes from Amex, which is typical of Amex, right? The only annual fee you have that's not Amex is the $550 Chase Sapphire Reserve. You have 23 statement credits. That doesn't include the TSA or global entry credit, which is insane. 9 monthly credits, 2 quarterly credits, 3 semi-annual credits, and then 9 annual credits. Again, a lot. Uh, I'm just saying it as it is. I'm not saying that this is a bad setup at all. I'm just saying that, I'm trying to analyze it in a way that, how would we improve on this setup? Like I mentioned before, the primary setup is the Amex Trifecta, and then you're using your secondary, which is a lot of 5% cards, which is the Chase UR cards plus the City Custom Cash. So there's that. So we're going to go over three things here. There's going to be some improvements. We're going to address the Delta Silver Medallion situation and kind of what that means to you. We're going to address the kind of the hotel goals, the hotel question. Basically, do you want to start with the Brilliant and the Ritz, or do you want to just chill out and just keep the Delta cards? That's an important thing. And I also want to address your core setup, how that's going to work, how that strategy is going to work out for you, because the core setup is what you use on your everyday basis, your everyday spending. And if you really dial that in really well, you can really condense that to have less annual fees, more benefit, and then you can focus on the benefit cards that maybe have higher annual fees because you have things like free night certificates or other benefits. They can really work themselves out and give you net positive value. Now, the secondary, these are not like, I don't want to poo-poo on these, but it's just that with these particular improvements, you're also going to lower your annual fees and lower your statement credit burden pretty well too by addressing these primary situations or primary questions we have. So starting with the first thing, which is the Delta Silver Medallion status, it sounds like you really want to have Delta Silver Medallion, which is totally cool. And as we all know, they refresh their cards, and so now you have to have, they're basically using that status as a MQD situation. So to get silver status, you have to spend money on your cards. And so the way to do that with the Delta Platinum and Reserve is if you have one Platinum card, you get 2,500 MQD as a boost. You have another Delta card like the Reserve, you can also boost it up too and get another 2,500 MQDs as well. So that's 5,000, which is the minimum amount you need for Delta Silver Medallion status. Now, the question then becomes do you really need the Delta Reserve card if you just want Delta Medallion status? Well, it depends, right? So the difference is they have the same statement credits. The annual fee is $300 less. So there's that part of it. So if you want to drop it down a little bit, you can take that out. There's also the issue of the companion certificates too, because the Delta Reserve has a companion certificate that can be used for, I believe it's like first class, business class, and some other stuff. And then the Platinum is like that other stuff, like main cabin plus and like economy, things like that. So basically the companion certificate on the Delta Reserve is better than the Platinum, but you are paying for it. So one of the stipulations of that, and I believe I'm right, but I could be wrong, just fact check me in the chat here. You need to pay cash for that companion certificate to work out. And so if you pay cash for a first class ticket, you can use that companion certificate to get your companion on there. The question then becomes, do you want to spend money on a first class ticket? Because those tend to be very expensive. You may not. I don't know what the answer is, but if you may not want to do that and you literally just want the certificate to have one and you don't mind flying economy, the Platinum card may be a better option. That is something I would just think about when you think about going through the Medallion Silver status. And next thing I want to go over is for the airline situation is, do you think you even need Medallion Silver status? Can you get away with not having that? Because although you do mention you get Sky Priority, you get the access to the baggage drop at MCO, that the lines tend to be long. If you don't have that benefit, the other benefits that come with Silver status are things like first check bag free, priority boarding, and these can be easily gotten on the lower tier airline cards. So I just listed a few just as an example. You have the AA Platinum Select, which gives you a first check bag free and priority boarding. And they all do this, by the way, for $99 after a $0 intro annual fee. You have the United Explorer card, which has the same thing for $95, but you also get 2 United Club passes per year, which is pretty cool. And then you also have the Delta Gold card, which is kind of the lower tier Delta card it's a little bit more expensive, but you do have a Delta Stays credit. By the way, if you are into business cards, Delta Gold Business is a better option because it gets $150 for a Delta Stay credit, which is going to make your net annual fee 0 if you could use it 100%. So I say Delta Gold, but Business Gold is probably the better option, just to throw it out there. But anyways, all these cards offer, like I said before, first check bag free and priority boarding, which are still Delta Silver Medallion benefits. So do you need to fly Delta? Can you fly the other airlines? Because I looked at MCO. MCO is not a hub airport. They fly Delta, they fly United, they fly American Airlines. It's not specific to one airline. Like, for example, Atlanta's like mostly Delta, or like Chicago's mostly United, right? MCO is kind of one of those airports that has all three. And so you can really pick and choose depending on what you want to fly on. And so you can really drop those annual fees and drop those statement credits by a lot just by eliminating both the Delta Reserve card and the Platinum card if you wanted to do so. But just food for thought. Chad Petticoff comes in saying that as a Delta loyalist, which is good because I don't fly Delta at all, but he does, the Delta companion certs are a pain. The eligible fares sell out fast before the flights get discounted, so you don't really get a full BOGO value. That's good to know. I've heard stories about that. I don't have any personal experience, but I really appreciate you putting out your data point there for us, because I hear that the Delta program is not nearly as good anymore because of the changes. But anyways, back to this. I think that having the lower tier cards is an option to make it better. That would be something to think about, depending on if you really, really want that silver medallion status or not. So really the take-home points from what I just talked about is, so you had the Delta Reserve and you had the Delta Platinum. You can consider just taking the Delta Reserve and just dropping that to two Delta Platinum. So you may not be able to have two Delta Platinums. So Platinum Business, I think, is kind of how you would do that. That would drop your annual fees down by a fair amount, at least $300, and have hopefully better Delta certificates to use that are for economy. Again, if you want to pay for a first class flight, that is, you can. It's a lot of money, so you do get more value back from the companion certificate, but I don't know. It's up to you. I would consider your lower tier cards, and if United or American Airlines would make sense, that's important too. Because again, where you're saying your home airport is really important to and pivotal to the decision here. At MCO, if that's your home airport, they do fly United, AA, and Delta equally. And then by doing these things, you can lower your annual fee and your statement credit burden, like I mentioned before. So that brings us to the next point, which is the hotel question. The question you asked me is, should I get the Brilliant or Ritz instead of the Delta cards? And so I looked at your setup, and I think 2 Aspires is fine. And just to kind of really quickly go back so we can see it all again, this is your setup again. So you have 2 Aspires. Those are only 2 hotel cards. And so you're thinking of dropping the Reserve card and the Platinum card to get hotel cards. I actually think having Hilton as your main setup is fine, because I think Hilton is just such a great program with such great rewards. It's a good balance between like the Hyatt, which gets you the better center point, and the Marriott, which kind of sucks, but they have better convenience. Hilton has more convenience than Hyatt, but like not as good rewards. And so I think having that is good. And their FNCs, they're just money. They're great. If you can get good redemption on those, like you can get a lot of value out of those. So I'm a really big fan of doing the Hilton situation. So for you specifically, you mentioned that you go to F1 in Vegas and Miami. And so at those locations, you also mentioned resort credits, or resorts are easy to find. So if they're easy to find, then it doesn't matter if the credit is resorts only or Hilton regular. You can use those credits for the resorts and make value of the $200 credits on both cards. So you may even consider getting a third Aspire or another Hilton card, depending on what you want to do. So my thing about this is that there's no need to get a Brilliant card or Chase Ritz-Carlton unless you think you'd get some value of Marriott, or you want to stay at more Marriott for whatever reason. That's going to come kind of to you as well. And so that's kind of what I'd say with that. I would say, again, if you want another Hilton free certificate, the Hilton Aspire card is the way to go for that. You can get a third one, I think, no problem. Depending on, I didn't count your Amex cards, but if you have enough, like 5 or less, then that would be fine. Also, the Surpass card, it would add another quarterly credit, although it's more general, kind of Hiltons as opposed to Hilton Resorts. Lesser of a annual fee. You can either, if you want to downgrade one Hilton Aspire, you can. If you want to add this onto the Hilton Aspires you have, you can. But basically, you get a $15K FNC. So if you think that you can spend $15,000 in a whole calendar year, it's a very we're way to do it. I know we're going to go over this in a little bit, but you also have a lack of grocery category because you only have a City Custom Cash. So if you want to use the Surpass for that card, that price, maybe that can help you get to that 15K over the course of a year, and then also get a 15K FNC as well, which is super awesome. So the hotel take home for this is to consider more Hilton Aspires. It's still the best card, even though they raise the annual fee and they put more credits on it. If you can use the resort credit and you can, handle the annual fee of $550, then I think it's totally fine. If you want to lower the annual fee, you can take the Hilton Aspire, either downgrade to a Surpass, or you could just get on a Surpass, so you have the ability to get 15K FNC over a year, depending on your spending. And then again, from my perspective, no need to get a hotel cards unless you really want to. And then that comes to the final portion of this, which is the category spend. And this is important because it kind of relates to your core credit card setup. And so everyone in the chat, just let me know if I'm wrong here, because I'm not the best at knowing how to get the best redemptions. But you mentioned that you have Amex MR points that transfer for 2 cents per point domestic. And from what I understand, that's super hard to do because from what I looked at, there's 2 domestic carriers. There's Delta, and there's JetBlue, and both of them tend to not redeem well just right off the bat. So then you have to go to your secondary option, which is transfer it to another partner airline and then transfer it through them. So you have things like Air France KLM to Delta, I would imagine, and then you have like British Airways for Avios to get to American Airlines, for example. I don't know if you get 2 cents per point from that either. Maybe if anyone knows, that would be helpful to drop it down in the chat. But I think doing that is very aspirational. You can get 2 cents per point on international flights. I think that's fine, but I think using MRs for domestic flight is not the best option. But you know what is a good option is to use Chase UR points for domestic flights. And so that's kind of what I'm going at here, because if you were to switch your primary spending setup to Chase and City, now you have a whole lot more optionality to use your points for domestic travel at a relatively decent redemption value. And because you have the Chase Sapphire Reserve card, if you really wanted to, you could also redeem it, for 1.5x points back base on the Chase Travel Portal. So there's that. I'd also say, do you need the Chase Sapphire Reserve if that's a thing? I know you talked about that earlier, getting into the Miami Grand Prix lounge or whatever. But is there a way to cut down on that $550 annual fee, maybe down to $95 by using the Ink Preferred? And we'll see kind of why I say that in a second. So the first thing I want to say is the City Center Premier is a great card, I think, in your situation. It's the same card that we had from before, and we'll see the slide on later on in the live stream too, but you get 3x points back on kind of a lot of categories: air travels, hotels, restaurants, supermarkets, gas, EV charging, and then 1x on everything else. $95 annual fee. You've got transfer partners. You've got like $100 hotel credit or what have you. And so you have a lot of options to get value back on this card and have a lot of coverage on your core setup for a lot of categories, earning thank you points. And you already have a City Custom Cash, so you're already halfway there. Might as well go for it, right? I would say that because you have the gold card, I don't know what your spending level of food is. If it is like $500 to $1,000 or less, I would like a month, I would say maybe not the best card to use for that. If it's like, $2,000 a month, that's probably a good card to keep. For the gold card, it's $250 annual fee. Here's the thing about the gold card. There are 3 things that are certain that it's going to happen. Okay. And we don't know when it's going to happen. It's going to happen very soon. I don't know if it's going to be 6 months from now, a year from now, tomorrow, who knows? The annual fee is going to go up. It's $250 right now. Okay. It's going to get more statement credits. And not only that, we know that the statement credits, or we are likely to think that the statement credits will get more restrictive. And by that, I mean, it may be like a Resi credit. You saw it in the Delta card, so you know it's probably coming to the gold card. All 3 of these things are not positive, right? And so we have to figure out how they're going to use this gold card in the future. And so because of that trajectory that they're going, because every other card that they've updated has done every one of these things, right? And so there's no way they're going to lower the annual fee on the gold card, right? There's no way they're going to give you less statement credits. And there's no way they're going to give you less restrictive statement credits. This is not going to happen. We all know American Express. This is exactly what they're going to do. So with that in mind, is that a card you want to keep? Only you're going to know by the answer to that question. But again, I'm not saying it's a bad card. Again, if you can spend tons of money on this card, then it's cool. But if not, like you're kind of a typical average user, then it may be worthwhile to get something better with a lower annual fee and less statement credits to help you burn it out. I just want to cover this real quickly. This is not part of it, but if you want to again have another 5% card, these AAA cards are super good. It's adding a new bank, which is Synchrony, which is not like my favorite thing to do if you're looking at strategies. But if you want to cover like a point for groceries or for gas, like one of these cards will be good for that setup just to cover it. Oh, it's just cash back. It's nothing like, there's no transfer partners or anything like that. But I think it's something to think about if you want to cover that one category that you're maybe missing in your setup. Know the City Custom Cash already, so you have one coverage, but the other coverage, if you want to like think about that, those would be 2 options. So then we come over to the Chase Sapphire situation versus the Ink Preferred. So the Chase Sapphire Reserve gets you 3x on travel. And now I mentioned the City Strata Premier before. They have 3x. I'll go back to that just so we can look at it. They have 3x points on the travel category, but that travel category kind of sucks, right? So it's air travel and other hotels, which is fine. It's kind of the majority of what you'd spend on it, but there's a lot of things that are missing, like car rentals, like cruises, like parking, tolls, and trains and subways and like all this stuff is missing, right? So how do you cover that? Well, you cover that with a card from Chase or Bank of America that have travel categories that cover every travel and transit category possible, or the Amex Green Card too. That's part of it too. So the reason why I point out to that is you need another card if you get the Strata Premier to cover those travel categories and transit categories that are missing on that other card. And so with the Sapphire Reserve, you get the React, which is cool. So if you want to keep that card, keep it. If you want to lower your annual fee, the Sapphire Preferred can also be helpful to lower that, but you only get 2x on travel. But on the Chase Ink Preferred, you get $95 annual fee for 3x on travel, which is so much nicer. And so because of the way you're using your cards, I think the Ink Preferred is a better option to have that coverage that the City Star Premier is missing. And so that's what I would say with the Chase Ink Preferred too. So the category take home for this is going to be, you're going to use City for your core setup. You're going to use Chase for your 5x categories and the 3x transit category. Questionable, cancel Amex Gold. If you're not using the Amex Trifecta, maybe you don't need it anymore. And then do you think you want to get the Ink Preferred or product change the CSR to OG Freedom Card? Those are things to think about when we look about the categories. So we take what we talked about with the airlines, the hotels, and the categories, and this is what we come up with. This is your new credit card setup that I think may be more helpful for you. Again, this is just based off the information you gave to me. There's going to be much more that comes into this if there's other information that I had, but based on what you gave me, this is what I think would be good. You have your primary setup being the Starter Premier, the Ink Business Preferred, and the Blue Business Plus. Now, the Blue Business Plus is not necessarily going to be the best thing, but because you have an Amex Platinum, I'm always in favor of having a secondary MR point earning card to make sure you can capture and hold those MR points in the rare case you want to cancel that high annual fee card. Because as you'll know, Blue Business Plus has no annual fee, and so you can keep those MR points alive with that card. However, you could replace it with a City Double Cash and then have a nice thank you point trifecta with the City Premier, custom cash, and as well as the double cash. We talked about the Delta situation. The Delta, I would say if you want to really lower your statement credits and lower annual fees, the Delta Gold would be fine. You get, again, that first check bag free on you, as well as I think 9 other people on your itinerary, as well as the priority boarding, which I think are the two things that I think are the most important to make your life a lot better in the air experience. You don't get that, Delta Silver Medallion, priority whatever, but that's kind of a situation you have to think about for yourself. Definitely keep 2 Aspire cards. Again, you could add a Hilton Surpass or not, or another Aspire or not, kind of up to you. And you can see on the bottom there, now all those cards, if you have gotten the Chase Ink Preferred, you've now downgraded that Chase Sapphire Reserve to another Chase Freedom or OG Chase Freedom. And so if you look at the whole bottom row there, you have a whole bunch of 5X category cards, which is super awesome. And so I think that's great. And not only that, you have them all be no annual fee. And so if you look at this setup, you now have a reduced annual fee of about $2,000. So about a 40% decrease in what you had from before, which is not small. Certainly less statement credits than before. Still have a lot, but not as nearly as many as you had from before, which is, every little bit helps. And you want to balance, and this is important to know because you want to balance the difference between having a lot of statement credits and a lot of value, because it's going to be a balancing act. And what I found is that the more time you spend with trying to maximize statement credits, the more exhausted you become because you want to do other things with your time. And because of that, that's something that is important to know too.